Welcome to The Transition Years, a podcast series designed to deepen our understanding of the key issues and opportunities that shape students' experiences with mathematics during a pivotal time, the final 2 years of high school and the first 2 years of post-secondary education. This series is part of the broader Launch Years initiative, which goes far beyond just a few podcast episodes. The goal is to raise awareness about the importance of these transition years so that educators, leaders, and community members are empowered to become local change agents, working to improve mathematics experiences and outcomes for all students. The Transition Years is brought to you by the Launch Years Mathematics Organization's Leadership Network, part of the Launch Years initiative at the University of Texas at Austin's Charles A. Dana Center, and is proudly produced by Amidon Planet. I'm your host, Joel Amidon, professor of teacher education at the University of Mississippi, and today I'm joined again by Dr. John Staley. John is the coordinator of special projects in Baltimore County Public Schools, but for today's conversation, he's wearing his hat as a facilitator for the Launch Years Mathematics Organization's Leadership Network. Hey, John, how's it going?
Hey, it's going pretty good, Joel. It's going pretty good. And that's a mouthful, that title, so Math LN.
Yeah.
LY Math LN.
Yeah, and it's like we've had a long journey here from. I mean, even I was listening back to some of the previous episodes of the Launch Years from, was it 2021 maybe 20?
Yeah,
yeah, and
21.
Yeah, and I remember I think you. And I was thinking about the all that's happened. Like, one, I got a promotion, so my title changed. My son has gone from, he was entering into the transition years, and now he's exiting the transition years in college. And so it's like I have a bunch different perspectives. So like it's like we've come full circle a little bit here, but then we get to talk about some amazing work that you've been able to facilitate over the past few years. Well, you and all the organizational leaders, it's kind of amazing.
Yeah, well, that's the key part. And as you mentioned about those transition years, so we have a granddaughter who lives with us. She's in 10th grade now. She'll be entering into those last 2 years. And then those first 2 years, the launch her into secondary. So man, how this work is really picked up over the last 4 years, in a whole bunch of different places, especially with the help of organizations.
Yeah, and so we first started. It was like you were first beginning to facilitate this group, the LY math organizations, and so where have we been? Where have we been, John? Let's set the stage.
So our focus over the 4 years has been twofold, and so I say that because the focus has been on, as you mentioned, those high school students that are going into their last 2 years of high school, and then as they go into their post-secondary. So that's always been the focus. And with bringing organizations together, the focus around organizations has been two main questions. What are the actions organizations can take to make changes on a big scale? And then what actions can organizations take to equip their members as local change agents? So we know this work has to happen in the schoolhouse. This work has to happen directly for our students and by teachers and educators and the community that's working right there on the grounds, boots on the grounds. That has to be the heart of the work. So that's been our focus over the last 4 years with how do we go about making sure that students, when they come into high school, they are prepared those first 2 years to have opportunities and options to go and finish high school and go off in their post 2 years. That you mentioned your son has gone through this process.
Yeah, and you were, and it was, and again, I was listening back to our previous episodes, and some of the things that you were saying, it was almost like you were reading the future. And I think you, in the previous episodes, we talked about, and I think Paul Gray, when we were in the supporting the work, he was representing NCSM, was talking about the power of sharing stories. So, and this is a podcast, let's share some stories. Like Noah, my son, was in high school and was on that path, accelerated up to calculus A, B, and BC, and like was kind of like it's almost like at the end of a sidewalk. It was like at the end of a funnel, like that led to a point. And he's like, well, what now? And he took some stats, but it was like almost like there was a lack of pathway. There was like it funneled down. But then when he went into college and he's like, I don't really need to take math anymore, right? And then he had an experience in a government class, but that was like built in with data science, analytics, like all sorts of that. And all of a sudden he got fired up again. He saw and you know, my son, he's got some aptitude for mathematics. Like, you know, we're doers. Like we embrace the coolness of mathematics in the Amidon household. And, yeah. And he saw, and he got fired up by a professor, and he talked about this major of quantitative social sciences, because he was really into policy. He's really into policy and like, you know, registering people to vote and everything. But he like the numbers side of it. And he saw like, oh my gosh, there a path emerged for him, and all of a sudden he sees like, oh my goodness, my passion for policy, my aptitude for mathematics, and now he's embracing this quantitative social sciences major and absolutely loves it. And just he texted me yesterday. He's like, I'm cooking in class. I'm like, whoa, what are you cooking? He's like, no, Dad, I'm doing well. I'm hip. I know what's happening.
Well, and Joel, to that point, what you're mentioning is, how do we help keep the love of mathematics, the love of learning mathematics in front of our students as they go throughout high school, coming out of middle school, as they go, because we know it's not just about what happens to them in high school, but as they go along their trajectory, you know, from elementary to middle, then middle into lower, let's call it lower high school, so 9th and 10th grade, but so that then when they get to 10th and 11th grade, so maybe, you know, some students will be taking calculus, but some students also recognize when they take statistics classes, and even when they take the calculus, how they will connect to a variety of pathways and options for possible career explorations as they go into and get into other types of content. And so how do we really help open up those pathways so that, yes, a student who does take calculus or a student who does take stat, a quantitative type, data science type of pathway, or a pathway that does have some of that core content that we've learned traditionally over years, that they see the nuances and the use of it as they go pursue career opportunities. Because what we don't want to do is have students turn off and say, now what? And then turn back on. Yes, we do want them to turn back on, but sometimes students that turn off stay off. You know, they'll go take that one class they have to take, but they won't recognize the use of mathematics in their lives, let alone as a career opportunity, a strength. You know, they have a strength and a skill set that they could use in a variety of ways, and we need to do a better job at that. And a lot of it has to do with, how do we look at the courses that our students take in high school when they're in those last 2 years, which I think are their formative years for their next. Not formative years overall, but formative years for what do they do in the next 2 to 5 years after they've graduated high school.
Yeah, and I actually just had a great conversation with a colleague here at University of Mississippi. He's in charge of our like STEM center that just opened up, beautiful building, and you know, this idea of trying to foster doers of STEM, and then the contradiction of, if you have like this sorting and narrowing pathway that's coming into it, or that's coming out of it, like that we have this just bottleneck where there's kids get sorted, or they're banging their head against the wall of a course that they're just having, like there's only one way through. There's one, you know, like we talk about being a gatekeeper versus like, no, there's a variety of doors. There's a variety of doors to go into. And this person was talking about the need for a quantitative reasoning for STEM majors class that he wanted to develop, so that there was other ways to go in, the more doors, right? More pathways, right? To do that. And just seeing that sort of encouraged, because it's like, what are we saying? We're trying to say that STEM is for all, but then if we're narrowing down, then our actions aren't matching up with what we're trying to do out there.
STEM for all is not defined by calculus. It's not like this and prerequisite calculus. So STEM for all, when we think about students who may not, even as they're going through their pre-K to 12, say pre-K to 8, 9, 10, they may not understand and know what it means, the math that's needed for options and opportunities that come at them in a STEM field. be it nursing, be it engineering, be it architecture, be it, and I'm just naming some of the ones that, traditionally we quote unquote think about.
Yeah.
Medical field, you got the science field. You have so many different fields now where a strong quantitative, a strong really number sense about it, a strong programming. So when you think about computational learning and all that comes into play, those strengths, boom, show up. As you mentioned, your son in his class that he's just really
like
really
policy, a policy class.
policy class
Need your
because
math.
of the numbers and everything are what's really coming to life. So how do we keep numbers and number sense and the algebra that goes along with it that's meaningful math so that we also graduate and have adults that no longer say, oh, I'm not a math person or math, or so how do we help stop that narrative too? Now, that's not that's not a focus of this initiative,
Right.
Launch's work, but that's a unintended good consequence of it. Changing this narrative on the back end of people graduating from a pre-12 experience with math and not seeing the use or value of it. So that is an outcome. That is a part of, changing that narrative of what happens for adults.
Yeah. So one of the calls to action that you stated a few years ago was this leveraging our group, right, in order to think about learning from others. A call to action to learn from others. So what have you learned? What has been learned over the last 4 years? I mean, you can't list it all, but like, what are some highlights?
No, well, some of the highlights are when you think about the work that's been happening in this last year, which has involved 22, now 23 states that are really looking at what's happening for their students as they go through high school. And so the collaborative work and the learning that we've seen states redesign their last 2 years of math offerings to have those math offerings not only have some core content, and I'll say core traditional, because the algebra piece is a component of what we traditionally have seen happen for students. Some of it that is still there, but also offer some of that other math, the data science, the quantitative literacy, and those math skill sets that help broaden and open up doorways. So we've seen some unique opportunities with some course design. We've seen states go through adjusting the policies that need to be in place. And I'm not just talking about graduation requirements. So the graduation requirements in some states have remained the same as far as the math graduation component of it. But the offerings of what math sits in those spaces have become better. And that collaboration has been with the 2-year and the pre-K to 12 setting and the 4-year and the 2-year. So you got community college settings and you got 4-year university and college settings collaborated with the pre-K to 12 to help make those opportunities better and broader for students. So now you probably see fewer 2-year or 4-year programs offering remedial type of math classes. They have those classes now more embedded, they have the supports embedded in a credit-bearing type of course for students, because we also recognize that used to be a big gatekeeper for many students. They come in the university, a 2-year setting, not pass that math remedial class 2-3 times. Next thing you know, they're no longer attending. So We've seen more collaboration around adjusting and making changes there to better support students go through that transition from pre-12 to a post-secondary setting. The organizations, the collaboration between the organizations has been like, wow. That was one of when I first was approached to sort of facilitate this network, one of my wonderings is, what's the benefit for an organization to be a part of the network to help do this work? Because many of the organizations that were a part of it already do work to improve mathematics teaching and learning, or just mathematics in general, from the pre-K to 12 focus, the secondary focus, the post-secondary focus. So, but what we've seen is the different organizations come together around this transition component heavily, producing not only the call to action 6 call to action statements we have and the resources that went along with it. But also, many of the organizations have picked up, and they've also, within organizations or collection of organizations, they're producing resources that will keep the work going. When I say keep the work going, reimagining high school mathematics and what's happening there, and organizations that participated in developing that document, then the extra resources that go along with it carry on beyond what we've been doing as a network. But it's one of those byproducts of coming together in space and then keeping this work going so that it's there for states to grow from, it's there for states to benefit, keep moving the work.
It's like and the more I'm thinking about it, and again, listen to the previous episodes where we had a lot of the math ed leaders, which was interesting because Dewey Gottlieb was, I think, represented ASSM, and now he's the president-elect of NCTM. Is like, hey, look at that. It's like seeing that actor in that previous movie. You're like, hey, look what you did. But that almost like a Venn diagram, I'm thinking about the overlap and how the transition years is like. You think about NCTM and thinking a lot about, the math education of, obviously K through 12, but then also thinking that they speak to math teacher educators too. And then you got AMTE, and then you got math leaders in there. You got math coaches, then you got ASSM, which is Association of
State Supervisors in Mathematics.
State Supervisors in Mathematics. Thank you. So and thinking, they're thinking about the policies and thinking about all the action there too. And it's like, it feels like you're facilitating like this vision for, hey, we could be paying attention to here, bringing people together. And then like, it feels like we got a vision like up in the sky almost, but then but as you said before, it's rooted down into the work that's happening within states. And I think that's something that's been cool too, is that getting to be a part of, I was in some of the meetings representing AMTE, is hearing the stories of states and the things that they were doing, not only from some of the webinars that you had. I think Washington State was featured prominently in one of the early webinars, but then also hearing like the story of like Colorado and like all that they've been doing to change, state recommended. I mean, we have a quote. It was from Kim Smith in there. It was from some of the materials that that y'all developed. It was extremely validating and inspiring for our work to revise our state's recommendations based on the launch year's call to action recommendations. It was truly a turning point in our work. I mean, they're rooted down in the actual what's happening in the state of Colorado. That's pretty cool.
And that the coolness of that is when we started this, we did not know or have the idea that what we would build and develop would have that kind of impact, have that kind of resource, be that kind of resource that states can lean on. That was the goal. That was the plan as we came together with the first year or two, and we developed the 6 call to actions. But we also knew creating another document that we hope it would push on policy. We would engage not only the educational side. So you're talking about building leaders and counselors, everybody involved there, and for our students, but also parents and families, but also communities. So thinking through how we even built out those 6 recommendations, targeting and really putting in explicit recommendations for engaging the variety of audiences of states like a Colorado really be able to start from not scratch, but start from somewhere, lessons learned, because part of what we've done with the network is we've built in, okay, what are the lessons that are learned from, you mentioned Washington. What did we learn from Georgia and the work that they did and the leaders down there in Georgia? How about in North Carolina? How about in Maryland? How about in Colorado? So when you think of the 23 states, and it's 23 states are part of the formal launches initiative right now that's doing the work, but there's other states that are outside of that 23 that are doing work in math ed, especially with this focus. And this is the part, as we think through and you're naming how the different organizations have always been about focusing on math and math education and learning. But quite often what happens is we have this focus on the pre-K to 8, the pre-K to 10. Never really a laser-like focus as a component of all the other work, the 11th and 12th. Sometimes it's sort of like, oh, by the time they get there, their paths have already been narrowed in or whatever. But
Yeah.
now we're saying, let's pay some attention to our 11th and 12th graders and what's their experience and how can we, they're headed into their next, they're going to be exiting our pre-K to 12 establishments, graduating from high school. What can we do to help them launch and go into a more, I won't say a math oriented or math focused, but go in with their math confidence and go in with their sense of math agency, their willingness to go use the math that they've been learning because they've seen opportunities and why it should be done.
Yeah.
So no longer just let's keep doing what we've been doing for decades of more algebra, and then some more algebra, and then you end up in, of course, calculus for some, or other courses that are not calculus, but so it's only a small percentage that take the calculus side, but all the rest, what were they doing? Some kind of algebra type course or algebra based course. For what purpose and what design? Now let's really put for what purpose and design behind it. So the why is there as they really go into post-secondary. They understand what they were learning, why they were learning it, and now how's it going to go into the future.
Nice. Well, and I just, as people get fired up when they hear, about some of these examples or some of the stories and even thinking oh, well, what can I do even in my local context? I mean, I do want to point out that we're going to have links to all the resources in the show notes. Wherever you find this podcast, click the link, you'll get access to some of the things and just some of the resources that are available. There's as you talked about, the 6 recommendations. There's videos. There's 25 curated toolkit resources. We've got, again, more podcasts, some webinars that are pretty explanatory. I mean, so all this stuff's out there, and then it's almost like you're finding this thing, but then it's linking to other things, like the stuff that Washington had. Like, I know that there's a bunch of links to that, and you get to see, you can go pointed to some of these other places that then are providing almost like a map for, hey, here's what it could look like in your context, right?
Yeah.
And it's like there's some momentum being built up.
Yeah, I mean that's the part where here we are 4 years in, and it's like, okay, what's next? And when we think about the what's next piece, when we were building the tools, the recommendations, and then the resources, and we say 25, they're focused. So when you think about 6 resources, man, the team of, and when we talk about the power of collaboration, this is when the 12 to 13 organizations put a call out to their members. Who wants to be a part of this next piece of it? So we built the recommendations, but who wants to be a part of building and developing the resources that will help stand up each of the recommendations? That part was about a year to a year and a half of strenuous work in the sense of we didn't just want a laundry list
Right.
of 1,000 different resources because for a state team that's doing any kind of initiative work, they have limited time and resources also. They want to be able to come to some focused targets. So that's why it's targeted it wasn't targeted to a special number 25, but it was about identify 3, maybe 4 key resources, each of the recommendations. And that team was able to build and develop that. So now what you see is states can pick it up, they can keep moving with it. They know the parts that they need. They know the part about us parent engagement and student voice, how critical that is, even as states are looking to build out those last 2 years of what does that mathematics really look like for students? What are they saying they need? How do we change what we've been doing traditionally for XYZ number of years, 50 plus years, and we'll probably tag 50 times a number of times, multiply it by 2 to get to probably 100 years of the same kind of pieces, but how do we change the outcomes? And so those recommendations, those resources, the examples, the models help point to states. And a big part of it is building members and organizations so that in different states, you've got members from the various organizations who know about the work of the transition years and what the focus is, and they're there to be a resource for state teams, be a resource in their own communities, be a resource in their own school systems. So that's the power of building out a network like this. Really getting it to the ground level so that I and my school understand why we're making some changes, why we're shifting some things that we're doing, and what the benefit and the outcome will be for our students as we open up doorways for them.
Yeah, it's the specific, like, yeah, the resources and how that they're, you know, accurately, I mean, curated well. I mean, that's like, like knowing that's, you know, you can go a lot of places to get a bunch of list of links to things, but to actually like, hey, these are pointed towards these
Yeah.
actual, the things that we're trying to accomplish here. One
Yeah.
thing I did, and this is a little bit off the list that I have here,
Okay.
because I think too, how do you your mindset going into acting as a facilitator of this group? And because it sounds intimidating, the facilitator of this math leadership network. And again, if we list all the different organizations that were represented here, and like how you ran meetings and facilitated action, I think just from that perspective, like what words of wisdom do you have for folks that they're put in positions where they're, you know, trying to get people to focus in on some vision to get things going? Like, because you create an environment where I showed up and like, I want to have something to share, to report, and then also then being sparked to move forward on something, which I'll share, you know, in a bit, but like my ideas about what AMTE can do as a call to action. But how do you what was your mindset going into being taken on this role of a facilitator of this leadership network?
Well, it came to two things. So initially, I remember getting the call, having a conversation with the Dana Center and the team invited me into this work. And I asked for a little bit of space, space being give me some time to reach out to some of the leaders who were leading the organizations that, you know, as a past president of NCSM, some of the leaders that were in place as presidents at that time when this whole initiative started, I reached out to a few of them. Two things my question was, how do you think this will be a benefit for your organization to be a part of a network like this? But I don't believe in just let's throw this together and let's go do it. If it's not going to be of a benefit, you know, for us to come together and meet on a regular basis, and initially we were meeting monthly, and then we went to quarterly based on, you know, we got some work done and we went to quarterly. Um, it had to have value for each of the organizations. Each organization had to see that their voice in the work could be valued. And so, for anyone who's looking to step in and lead and facilitate the bringing of people together, the bringing of organizations together, you got to make sure that each organization that invited in will see the value for their voice being in the space. Other thing about it is when you go to bring organizations in, it has to be what's the benefit, the overall benefit to their membership. So if you have an organization like you mentioned AMTE, I was with NCSM, I was with different organizations. We had Banneker, TOTUS was a part of it, MAA was a part of it, the Alliance of Indigenous Math Circles. I don't want to miss anybody. AMATIC. Ooh, man, who am I missing? ASA.
Yeah.
You know, so we had 13 different organizations out there, and each organization has this unique calling for what they do for their members and the benefits they provide their members. We had to make sure if you're putting a network together, or my mindset behind it was making sure that it would be of a benefit to that. And also that was a voice that we know we need to elevate. We couldn't just put together a network of math ed organizations, teacher organizations only. We have to have the societies that were the professional societies become a part of it in somehow, some aspect. So we have CBMS was a part of it with initial conversations and the networking piece of it. We have MAA, we had ASA. We have to have those professional sides because we need to think where are our students going, especially if they're going in that road.
Right.
And when you want to put a network together, you want all those voices because I want to hear if you as a professional network of mathematicians or statisticians are thinking, no, wait, hold, stop, pause. We need to hear that on the front end versus let's go down the road 2, 3, 4 years.
Yeah.
And opposition has been out there the whole time. We just weren't listening. So you got to invite everybody in. I'm not saying none of that was about opposition.
Yeah.
You got to bring the voices to the table if you're looking to build a network around something that's so pivotal for our students.
Yeah, that idea of like voice and value, right? Like voice that they have a voice in the space, but then they're providing value to their membership. Yeah. Thank you. You did a good job with that one. That's just off the cuff right there. There you go.
Well, I mean, that's 4 years of doing this work, and that was the question. that was the question on the front end. Before I said yes to doing this and helping bring the network together and everything, I had to, I went to about 4 to 5 different either current presidents or immediate past presidents. Just had a quick phone call conversation with them, either phone or we jumped on Zoom at that time. And we just talked for about 10, 15 minutes. And I, put out there thought, because the work of launches had been happening. Some of the different organizations have been a part of the advisory boards of Launch's first round of initiatives and everything along those lines. It helped build out some resources that Launch's had initially built out. And so I didn't want this to be a duplication of what had been done. And I want to see, did they think that it would be of value? And yes, they did. And so thus we moved forward, or at least I moved forward in that role. I guess I had said no, they might have found somebody else.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't be having this podcast today.
Yeah.
And who knows what might have happened. So
yeah. Well, and it just, again, the environment you create with like infectious towards like, okay, what can our organization do? But then also too, like you're saying, well, what value can we offer? And even thinking like AMTE has had these community circles, and like maybe there's a community circle around the launch years, but then also too, we have a number of affiliates, right, that are at the state level. And even just thinking about the overlap of the states that are already in the launch years, like was it 20 states? Yeah, 23 states. Yeah. And then looking to see where the affiliates, and are they aware of these things that are going on? Are we tapping in? Are the affiliates connected to the people that are doing this work within their states? And so like, just, again, making sure, hey, you're doing this thing and they're doing this thing. And like, are you aware of each other so that you can be, again, the power of the organizations working together? I think that's been a common theme of all of our conversations, John, is the power of organizations being able to do some good stuff.
I mean, that's the idea of when you build a network, you don't build a network just so that you can say, oh, hey, we come together and we meet once a month or however we meet. You build it so that you can create the power, the synergy. And what you see happening is you just thought through, like, different organizations have also targeted specific podcasts, have different working groups that relate to this first 2 years work. And that's how it's become a part of the various organizations' work. That's been a part of their work over the last couple of years and is on their docket moving forward as they go forth with some other work that they're doing now, have done in the last year or so, and what they have on the pathway of their work plans. When an organization builds out what's our focus and where we're going, that's often informed by president. As presidents have passed on from year to year to year across the last 4 or 5 years, what you see is this part of saying, hey, yes, let's pay attention to these last 2 years, these first 2 years. So what's happening for our upper high school students and what's happening as they go off into the other side of the pre-12 experience, and resources that each of the different organizations done independently too is powerful in a sense, because that speaks to what do our members need to help build this up.
So as we're kind of moving forward, what are the next calls to action for listeners of this podcast?
And that's the hard question. Well, one of the things I would recommend is think of what role can you play in helping support the work as it moves forward. And when I say helping support the work as it moves forward, there's got to be some mind shift changes when it comes to spaces where the role of calculus has played a dominant role in that maybe school setting, maybe even the university or 2-year, 4-year setting. So think about, is that the end all be all, and what role can I play? So if I'm a K-12 teacher, I'm in the secondary setting, I need to have a strong understanding of what can I use there. So when I look at, I'm going to go back to the call to action recommendations. Am I about helping inform other teachers, helping inform counselors? So maybe I pick up some of those resources to help inform counselors that the pathway of funnel as many kids as you can into calculus versus good, strong pathway through 10th grade, and then options 11th and 12th grade is key and critical. And those students and the universities on the other side are picking up that idea of having those doorways open for students. If I need to work with parents and students, how do I help parents and students recognize and realize they have alternatives as they continue to move through? Here's the strength that sit behind the options that are available. So think through that space. How can I be connected to the work that's happening in my state? So most states, if you have a state that is all the school systems is system led versus it comes down from the state, then the state office of education is still doing work around helping support it. When you as a school system, if you're out there in a school system or a university, you hear what the state is doing, ooh, tune in. Ooh, how can I be a part of it? Let me help be a part of what you're building out, what you're developing, what you're creating, where you want to go with this, because that's what I always say to the teachers and building leaders is those opportunities to influence what's happening at a state level. When they come your way, that's when you should step up. If you don't want to step up then okay, you just let it go by and you keep working, but you got to step up and step in. And there's resources so call to action for everybody, go take a look at the call to action resource.
Yeah.
Go figure out which ones do I need to gain a better understanding of. So that was our initial work, the network. What is all of this work around transition years? And some states were already doing at that time. And how do we learn about the different works and the bodies of work that are happening to help inform ourselves? So go get informed yourself. Then how do you share what you have learned about the transition years with others? And then how do you become a part of not only sharing, but a part of the movement to help create for our students? We know we can't have this conversation 10, 20 years from now, and our students are still pigeonholed into a calculus or non-calculus pathway. And you can only really see two options out there.
It gives you, I mean, you're talking about like raising your hand in the meeting and say, hey, like we can, there's something we can do here. And then you know that you've got all the resources that are available through the Launch Year's site, and like that you've curated, the organizations have curated, like it's like you don't have to go and reinvent the wheel, right? It's there. Like you've got stuff to help and support you in having those like, hey, let's go look at this together at least. You know, there's models out there so you can have confidence in raising your hand and being like, what am I doing? No. There's things there. There's stories there that you can then lean on.
There's places for you to start, and you don't have to go out and search it. You don't have to Google search it. You don't have to do any kind of searching for it. Go look at what's there.
Right.
Start from there. There's more resources that are coming and in creation and being created, and because the organizations have picked up this work. This is bodies of work that organizations are doing now. So there is more to come, but you got a foundational piece that's right there on the website that'll allow you to really get into some core resources and the building of the resource. One last add-in. One of the criteria as the teams were building it out is we had to have resources that were open source, free articles, free this, free that. And also if you had a purchase one or a resource that had a cost to it, okay, you can have that one also. You had to have some resources out there, because if I'm in a state or school or a school system and I'm trying to start this work, funding for me to go buy XYZ book at such and such a dollar for how many people, not going to be there. But the ability for me to give out a print-free resource, a post-a-print resource, that's there. So I thank the organizations for, in many cases, opening up resources in that sense that give the community and the broader community free access to them. That's been a part of the contribution from the network, also from the members of the network.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So what's next for the Launch Year's Math Organization Leadership Network, or LY Math LN?
Right,
to be determined?
It is to be determined. So we know we're at a phase where this round of the Launch Year's Initiatives work is coming to a close. The Dana Center, the team at the Dana Center that runs this work, the overall On Shears initiative work is in the middle of figuring out where do we go and things along those lines. So I know as I've talked with Denise, who has been really the person at Dana Center, who I've worked closely with over the last 3-4 years, our recent conversations have been about what would we imagine if the network was still going to play some role. And one of the things I would offer is that where members at the ground level, we elevate that more. So we not only have the list of members in the different states from the associations that can be there, but we really have those members playing more of a role in the direct support and the direct access to state teams as they're building out this work. So really that's one of the pieces. The other part I think is already happening is as the different organizations have collaborated and built out different other resources that relate to these last 2 years, the first 2 years, the transition years, that work keep going. So we still see that in the space. We see organizations that will have standards revisions as to the body work they do. And when they're looking at it, the transition years is a part of their thought process, and how do they go about doing it? So the groundswell of the work continuum will continue in some avenue, some aspect, be it the organizations, and those organizations are understanding the power of the collaborative space. I'm not saying they didn't before, but this has been a piece of a focused niche that really has let them say, okay, let's work with, let's reach out to. Who else do we need to have as a part of this initiative that we might want to stand up as an organization, but we know when we get several to bring it to has more power to it. So
yeah, that's pretty good. And so one of the questions I wanted to ask was like, what are we going to title this episode? And I think with everything that we talked about, I kind of like this idea of looking back, but moving forward, right? Looking back and moving forward, having that idea of like that, whatever iteration is going to do, but like you've put a lot of the LY Math LN has put a lot of resources into place for this work to continue and being handed over into places, and then to keep encouraging the kinds of to keep developing stories about how people are using this and moving it forward so that others can do it, because there's the awareness is out there.
Yeah, it is. And Joel, as you mentioned, your son earlier, having gone through this, I've got a granddaughter. She's probably not going to she will be transitioning. So she's going to 11th grade, 12th grade, and then on to secondary. But I've got a 3-year-old grandson, Asa. And truth of the matter, the heart of the work I do and I continue to do has always been about providing what's been best for my own and also best for those I love and then for our children abroad. So if I wouldn't want it for our children, I wouldn't want it for any children. So what I think about this work, he's 3 years old, hasn't started kindergarten yet. So in 2 years, he'll start kindergarten. And so you figure 2 plus 8, 9. Yeah. So you figure in 11 years, the evidence of what we've done and the foundation we've laid now, I want to see be impactful for him. So that when he goes into his high school experience, it's got to be different than what our students of nowadays in the last XYZ decades have been going through, because we know we need to do more. We know we need to do better for them. And I'm going to tell you, Asa's depending on it. So let's go do it.
Thanks, John. That's a great way to end this podcast, but not end the work, right? So wherever you found this podcast, there will be a link to the show notes that will contain all the referenced information in this episode, including the recordings of the previous episodes of the transition years and all the recorded webinars, toolkits, all the stuff. So otherwise, you can head to amidonplanet.com/transition years. That will also get you to the right places. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Transition Years. We hope that what you heard has led you to be informed, inspired, and empowered to improve the mathematics experiences and outcomes for all students related to the transition years. The Transition Years is brought to you by the University of Texas at Austin Charles A. Dana Center and is an Amidon Planet production.